What is up, everybody? It's Brock Hebner here from NoCoastBias.com, and welcome to episode 7 of 5 rounds. It's been a little while. Took a few weeks off, got really busy with work. I was sick for a week, had some stuff going on, but we are back with episode 7 of 5 rounds. This week, we're going to be talking about UFC 186. We're going to talk about Demetrious Johnson a little bit. We're going to definitely talk about Mayweather and Pacquiao, even though that is not an MMA or UFC topic. There's no escaping the biggest fight of the century. So we're going to definitely talk about that. We're going to talk about Jon Jones. That's the hot topic of the week. And then we're going to also talk about Jon Jones's replacement for UFC 187. So let's get right into it. UFC 186 was this past Saturday in Montreal, Canada at the Bell Center. First off, before I get into the card, this was not a good event for the UFC. I mean, the event itself was all right. You know, the fights were decent, but it was reported that they had to cut off, a certain amount of the Bell Center just to make it look like they were in a packed house. The gate wasn't very good. We all know pay-per-view numbers weren't very good. People were leaving at the in the middle of the main event. It just wasn't good for him. Now, granted, Rory McDonald was supposed to fight Hector Lombard on this card. Renan Barão was supposed to fight TJ Dillashaw on this card. Rampage Jackson, up until the last, few days before the fight, wasn't going to be able to fight on this card. So it was a mess of an event. But anyways, let's get into the fights. I personally didn't start actually watching the fights until the main card. So I will talk a little bit about more depth of the main card fights, but let's go over all the results. So in fight number 1, Randa Marcos defeated Ashley Daling by unanimous decision. Fight number 2, Valerie Letumo defeated Jessica Rokosi by unanimous decision. Our third fight, Nordine Talib defeated Chris Clements by unanimous decision. Our fourth fight of the night, Olivier Albin Mercier defeated David Michaud by rear naked choke in round number 3. And our fifth fight, Chad Laprise beat Brian Barberena by unanimous decision. And in our sixth fight, Alexis Davis defeated Sarah Kaufman by armbar in round number 2. And our seventh fight, Patrick Cote defeated Joe Riggs by unanimous decision. And into our main card, Thomas Almeida defeated Yves Jabouin by TKO in the first round. This Almeida kid is something. He is definitely poised to be somebody very good. I believe his record is completely undefeated. I can check here real quick. It'll tell me what he is. Yeah, he's 18-0 with 14 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 1 decision. He's been in the UFC for a very short amount of time at bantamweight, but he's definitely on the right track to being a star, I think. But that was a great performance by him, knocking off a good veteran like Yves Jabouin. In our ninth fight, John Makdessi defeated Shane Campbell by TKO in the first round. This was actually a pretty good fight, even though it was a first round TKO. Campbell didn't look terrible. Basically, Makdessi just caught him towards the end of the fight, or towards the end of the round, and just swarmed him, wouldn't let him really catch himself, and wound up knocking him out standing up. The ref had to step in and stop the fight. So Makdessi looked very, very good. In our 10th fight, Michael Bisping defeated CB Dollaway by unanimous decision. This was a close fight. Really, it was probably a 1-1 fight going into the third round, and Dollaway was just way gassed out. He was so tired. And Bisping took advantage of that. Bisping looked good. I'm not a big fan of Michael Bisping. I think he talks too much and doesn't back it up enough, but, good win for him. He's just kind of floating in the middle of his career. He's not really in talks for title shots. He's not really much of anything. He's in many ways somewhat of a gatekeeper, whether he likes it or not, for the middleweight division. In our co-main event, our 11th fight, Rampage Jackson made his return and defeated Fabio Maldonado by unanimous decision. I was a little surprised by this. I thought that Rampage was going to knock him out. Maldonado looked sloppy. He couldn't stand with Rampage, and of course he doesn't really have much of a ground game. So Rampage just kind of took him apart for 3 rounds. So it was good to see him back in the octagon. And then in our main event, Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson defeated Kyoji Horiguchi by submission armbar in the 5th round with 1 second left in the fight. It was really amazing. For the first round or two, Horiguchi actually looked like he might give DJ a real fight. He was hanging in there with him. He was popping in and out real quick and fast, like his style is. He was hitting him fairly hard a couple times, and he looked like he might actually have a chance at defeating Johnson. But once he got into the end of the second round, definitely the third, fourth, and fifth round, of course, DJ just took over the fight. He is by far the best fighter in that division. He's easily one of the best fighters in the world. But Horiguchi, let's be honest, he was thrown into this a little too early. He should have gotten a few more fights. I don't know why this wasn't Jon Dotson, to be honest. But regardless, Horiguchi, I think, he got a little too exposed too quickly. He only had a couple fights before he got this title shot. So hopefully Horiguchi, they let him grow properly before he gets a title shot again, because I think he definitely will get another one. But he looked good, but DJ's just incredible. Which brings me into round number 2. I want to talk about Demetrious Johnson. This guy gets a ton of criticism from fans. He's not a pay-per-view guy. He's a tough guy to sell. Mainly because he's not a big guy. He's 125 pounds. He's not a big dude. He's not, this brash, outspoken guy. He's very modest and very humble, and he just lets what he does in the octagon speak for him. And it's a shame that someone like him can't be a big pay-per-view draw, because he is amazing to watch. I mean, he's not boring. He doesn't just take you down and hold you there or anything. He stands up and strikes. He takes you down. He wears you down. And he obviously fights for the finish. Most guys, when they knew they had the fight won, like he did in the 5th round, would have just let it go. But because he is who he is, he submitted Horiguchi with literally 1 second, which is a UFC record for the longest finish in the history of the sport. So he's seriously an amazing fighter. He's one of the best, if not, some people like Joe Rogan think that he is the best pound for pound fighter in the world, and I don't think that's crazy to say, because he truly is amazing to watch, whether you like him or not. It's a shame that you have to be a guy that does crazy things outside of the octagon and says crazy things at press conferences, while also being very good at what you do, to be a huge draw in the UFC. It's a shame that someone like DJ can't be a big draw. But I didn't want to talk about him too much. I just want to kind of get my 2 cents in there for what I think of him. I think he's an amazing fighter. I think that he's one of the best fighters in the world. I don't think that there's anybody that can really knock him off of his throne. I feel like he's going to hold on to that title for an extremely long time. But let's go ahead and jump on over to round number 3, which is the fight of the century. Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. Typically, this would probably be my 5th round, what I finish off on. But because this is a UFC podcast, an MMA podcast, there's some bigger things that happen in the world of MMA that made this drop down to our 3rd round. But regardless, as we all know, this is the biggest fight in any type of combat sport that we've probably ever seen, if we're being honest, right? I mean, it's by far the best pound-for-pound fighters on the face of the earth in boxing. They've beaten everybody. Mayweather's beaten everyone he's beaten. Pacquiao's beaten everyone. Pacquiao's the only guy to ever win a title in 8 different weight classes, which is just unbelievable and unheard of, which of course sparks the controversy of him possibly taking steroids and stuff. But I don't find that to be true, because while they test, and as corrupt as boxing is, they do test for drugs, and he's never failed a test. And it's not that hard to get steroids to pop up on a test or anything like that. So, but yeah, huge fight this Saturday, $100 pay-per-view, which I think is absurd. But what's crazy is that most people that I've talked to about this, I'm like, yeah, it's $100. Like, isn't that crazy? It's like, oh, I'll pay it. Like, yeah, I'll pay it. It's worth it. And the thing is, it really is worth it. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing that, of course, this could happen again next year. I mean, you have to think, if Pacquiao beats Mayweather, they're definitely going to have a rematch, right? I mean, you'd think so. The guy who knocks off Floyd Mayweather, yeah, he's going to want a rematch. But as it stands right now, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's the fight of the century. It's the most important fight in a very long time between the 2 best fighters in the world, and I absolutely cannot wait. Um, you know, I think that Pacquiao's going to win the fight. I know that might seem a little crazy, but it's also not because it's Pacquiao. But I think he's going to win the fight, and here's why. So Floyd Mayweather, throughout his boxing career, has fought very powerful guys, and obviously beaten him. He's undefeated. He's 47-0. He's fought in very fast guys that are faster than him, and he's known for being very fast, and he's beaten them. But he's never fought somebody who is just as fast as he is, and stronger than he is, and more powerful, which is what Pacquiao is. And I think that that's going to pose a lot of problems for Floyd Mayweather. He's going to go in there into the ring with a guy that is just as fast as he is and is more powerful than he is and actually can knock you out. Yeah, Mayweather's had, what is something like 25 knockouts or something like that. But when's the last time you see Floyd Mayweather knock somebody out? Mayweather goes in there, he just drags it out for 12 rounds. He doesn't let you hit him. He just holds his shoulder up in front of his face. He moves around. He dodges in and out real quickly. He's real fast, and he drags it out to 12 rounds and wins that way. And Pacquiao, he's well documented. He can definitely knock you out at any point in time. He's a very powerful guy for his size. And I think what's going to happen is that at some point, I do think it's going to be by knockout. I think if this goes to decision, it's going to be Mayweather's fight, regardless. I do think that Pacquiao's going to knock him out, though. I don't know. I'm not going to predict what round or anything like that. But I do think that what's going to happen is at some point, Pacquiao is gonna catch Floyd. Floyd's going to be moving one direction. Pacquiao's going to swing and connect. And I think it's going to stagger Floyd. I think it's going to throw him off his game. It's going to rattle him, and then Pacquiao's going to take full advantage and wind up putting him down. And it's going to be huge when that happens, which is I think it's going to happen. But it's also not totally crazy to think that Mayweather's going to win the fight. It's one of those situations where one way or the other, it's not outlandish to think that one guy's going to beat the other. It's almost really just evenly split down the middle, it seems, on who people think are going to win. Pacquiao definitely has the fan side of it, though, because not a lot of people like Mayweather. People will pick Mayweather. If you're a betting man, you're probably going to pick Mayweather simply because he's 47-0. His fighting style spells a win, that kind of thing. And he's a safe pick, to be honest. But a lot of people want to see him lose and want to see him get knocked out even because he's so over the top and he's so cocky and arrogant with everything that he does, and people just don't like people like that. But don't want to spend a too crazy amount of time on this because for one, I don't really pay attention to boxing all that much. I will watch when either of them fight, but it's about as far as my boxing knowledge goes, so I'm not going to sit here and act like I know every little thing. But Mayweather is going to lose his first ever fight. Pacquiao is going to knock him out at some point within those 12 rounds, and it's going to be a thing of beauty. I cannot wait for Saturday night. So now, though, I want to get into what really this podcast is all about this week. And that's a man who goes by the name of Jon Jones, the now former UFC light heavyweight champion, the now former number one pound for pound ranked guy on the face of the earth. He's done, for now at least. I put up a piece on NoCoastBias.com titled "You're Done, Jon Jones," and basically talking about just kind of how the UFC needs to step in and finally take matters into their own hands and suspend him and strip him of his title and not let him fight at UFC 187 at the end of May, and just be done with him for the time being because he's done too many crazy things. And what do you know? They stepped in, they stripped him of his title, they suspended him indefinitely, and he's no longer fighting at UFC 187 in the main event. Who knows what he's going to go do? It's a sad thing. For those who don't know, I'm gonna give you just a kind of a timeline real quick, like I did in my post, about the three big things that have happened with Jon Jones over the past 3 years. So in 2012, he crashed his Bentley Continental GT into a light post and was arrested and given a DUI. In 2014, the test did not come out until January 6th, But on December 4th, he tested positive for cocaine metabolites, which basically just means cocaine. This is a month before his fight with Daniel Cormier, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding why they allowed him to fight when he tested positive for cocaine. It was a huge ordeal. He was fined $25,000, big whoop. And then now, on Sunday, he was involved in a 3-car accident, which later came to be that he was in his rental Buick. He ran a red light, hit the car that had a 25-year-old pregnant woman in it, which we later found out had actually broken her arm, which is why his crime went from a misdemeanor to a felony. Jones then, and the lady he hit wound up hitting somebody else after Jones hit her, so that's why it was a 3-car accident. Witnesses say they saw Jon Jones, one of them being an off-duty police officer, get out of the car, run off on foot to the top of a hill, then come back, not to check on the people that he just caused an accident with, but to grab a wad of cash, stuff it down his pants, and run back off again. And the police were searching for him for, a day or so until he turned himself in. But also, an awful thing, just if we stop right there, what a terrible human being. I mean, really, and yeah, they found marijuana in a pipe in his car as well, when the police searched the car. So, who knows if he was driving under the influence again, this time of marijuana, now of alcohol. But what kind of human being runs a red light, causes an accident where somebody got injured, and instead of getting out of his car and make sure everyone's okay, he runs off, and doesn't just run off, comes back, grabs a wad of cash, and runs off again, and leaves all the evidence that this rental is linked to him as well. Like, what an idiot, for one, and what just a terrible human being. But he ran off. The police were looking for him because he was just a suspect. Well, first they wanted him for questioning. Then he turned into a full-blown suspect whenever all the witness reports came out that it was Jon Jones. An off-duty police officer saw the whole thing and even said, I love the UFC. I know who Jon Jones is. I know what he looks like. And that was him. And the police were out looking for him. They finally issued a felony warrant for his arrest for the exact crime was leaving the scene of an accident in the event of possible cause of death or injury to somebody else, something like that. But basically, he left the scene of a crime. It was a hit and run, and he injured somebody. The fact that this pregnant woman got injured is what turned this from a misdemeanor into a felony because she broke her arm. And that's when Jones decided he was going to turn himself in. So he turned himself in. Later that night, got out on $2,500 bail. The judge ruled that, in the initial hearing, that he was going to let Jones travel to Las Vegas on May 23rd for his fight with Johnson. And then it was reported that on Tuesday at the same time, Lorenzo Fertitta and Dana White were flying to Albuquerque to speak with Jon Jones, which we then later found out is they went over there strictly to talk to him, have a discussion, and then take his title away from him and suspend him, basically. What else they're going to do, I don't know. I'm assuming because of what he means to the company. I mean, remember, guys, we can't just diminish all his accomplishments because of his outside of the octagon activities. This is the best fighter on the face of the earth right now in terms of MMA. He's the best fighter in the world. Nobody could touch him. And he defended his light heavyweight title a record 8 times, which is a record for that division. And he was in conversations at the age of 27 of possibly being the greatest of all time, which I didn't agree with. I still think it's Anderson Silva. But there were many people who truly believed he was the best fighter ever, period. And it's a shame that he had to go out and do all these stupid things to get him in trouble. I mean, he's been given chance after chance. I mean, outside of the DUI, the cocaine, and then this hit and run, at UFC 151, that was the one and only UFC event that was ever fully canceled. Why? Because Dan Henderson was slated to fight Jon Jones. Dan Henderson got hurt, And as a last-minute replacement, Chael Sonnen was going to step in to fight Jon Jones, and Jon Jones refused to do so. He refused to fight Chael Sonnen on short notice, which caused them to cancel the entire fight, which means that all these other guys who were supposed to fight on that card didn't get paid, didn't make money they needed for their families, all because of this one selfish guy. And then when you look at back in September, whenever he was supposed to fight Daniel Cormier at UFC 178, Jones started this huge brawl in a Las Vegas hotel with Daniel Cormier. Yes, Jones started that. And then went on to national TV on ESPN and started calling Cormier names and stuff like that. Names I'm not going to repeat. And started calling him names and being extremely unprofessional, caused him to lose his deal with Nike, all these just crazy, crazy things. And the UFC has let him get away with it because he's Jon Jones. He's their best fighter. He became their biggest pay-per-view draw, outside of maybe Ronda Rousey or such. You know, he brought them so much money, so they kind of let it go. But this was the last straw. This was the last thing that could have possibly happened. There was nothing they could do. Even if the courts weren't going to do anything, there's no way that the UFC could have let Jon Jones fight in May. The kind of reaction he would get from people would be unbelievable, knowing that this man took his car, wrecked it, injured a 25-year-old pregnant woman, and ran off with cash instead of checking on people to make sure they were okay, and tried to hide from the police. What a terrible person. He would have gotten such an awful reaction. He was losing so many fans when all this came out because people just... It's just you can't wrap your head around the idea of somebody being like this. And I know that what Jon Jones does in his personal life, in his life outside of the octagon, is his own business. But when you're at the status that he is at, best fighter in the world, you're the face of the company, basically. You are a role model for a younger generation of people. People are looking up to you to be you. You have to change your life around. You have to stop doing stupid things. Because there's now people that look up to you. And you don't want them doing these dumb things, so you can't do them yourself. And it seems like Jon Jones never got his own head wrapped around that idea. That because he's in the position he's in, he has to stop doing certain things. He can't go out and just party whenever he wants. He can't just go off and wreck his car and run off instead of checking on people, being just a good human being. He has to be a better role model, which he just isn't. And I think it was the exact right move for the UFC to step in and finally just say, hey, you know what? As far as we see it right now, you're done. We're suspending you. Not even for a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, indefinitely. Which basically sounds like to me is, whether they're going to help him or not, they're going to make him get help. And they will not let him start fighting again, or even give him another fight to start training for, until they feel like he is ready to come back. Now, this is the UFC we're talking about here. And there's a good chance that the indefinite suspension could be up here in a couple months. Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if they just kind of gave him a slap on the wrist. Almost like when Jones turned himself into rehab for the cocaine thing for one day. You know, I could see the UFC easily just pull it once the title, you know, is won at 187, give him a few months, and then pull his suspension off and reinstate him back into the company and let him fight for it again. You know, and what they should do also is whenever he does come back, I'm hoping that they keep him out of the octagon for at least a year. It's like the minimum, I feel like, would at least be a year. But I hope that when he does come back, they don't give him an immediate title shot. Sure, he never lost it, but he needs to learn a lesson, and I think that he should at least have to fight 1 or 2 times to earn that title shot. Because think about it, we're talking about hopefully at least a year, if not more. Within that time, new contenders are going to rise up. People who are going to deserve title shots are going to be there. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Jones does possibly return. For all we know, he may never fight again. What if the crazy thing happens and he has this indefinite suspension, and when the UFC decides to lift it, he just kind of says, you know what, I really just don't want to fight again. I'm done fighting. How wild would that be? What a documentary or biopic that would be, right? The life and times of Jon Bones Jones. But the UFC, like I said, they made the right call. They did what they had to do. They could not allow this guy to fight and to continue fighting until he is okay in his head and doing the right things for himself and for his career. So, as we move into our fifth and final round, what do we make now of UFC 187? Did the UFC just decide to scrap the fight completely and make a Vitor Belfort and Chris Weidman the main event? Thankfully, they didn't. Anthony Johnson will now be fighting Daniel Cormier for the undisputed light heavyweight title, not an interim title. Since Jones got it stripped away from him, it's not an interim title. It is a undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world. And that will be fought between Anthony Johnson and Daniel Cormier. Now, some people I've seen on social media aren't super into the whole Daniel Cormier thing, only because his last fight was a loss to Jon Jones. Let's think about it here. So, when you take Jon Jones out of the picture now, by the way, the UFC took him off all rankings, so as it stands, Jose Aldo is now your number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Don't know how much I agree with that. Whatever. He's a great fighter. So, anyways, you have Rumble already fighting for it. So your number two guy was Alexander Gustafsson, who Rumble beat to get this shot, and Gustafsson has not fought since. So that wouldn't have made a whole lot of sense, right? And then you have Cormier at 3, and then Rashad Evans at 4. As far as I know, Rashad Evans is still hurt. He's not even signed for another fight right now. He's still hurt. And even if he wasn't hurt, you really think it would be that easy to get him to fight a really good friend of his in Rumble Johnson, who he trains with for the title on a month notice? I don't think that would have happened. And then you got in the 5th spot Ryan Bader, who was on social media, making it known, hey, I am ready to go. I will fight for that title right now against Rumble. It does not matter. And, while he has won 4 fights, to be completely honest, he hasn't really beaten many people. One of those fights may actually be a true, that's a win. That's one that's going to start putting you in the right path. And Bader's just not, to me, he's not championship material. Just to be completely honest. I think it is kind of funny. I was talking to my buddy Justin about all this, and he had said it's kind of funny how the UFC, Bader's out there going, hey, like, put me in, coach. Hey, UFC, I'm ready. And they're like, nah, we got it covered. But so Cormier, even though he did lose his last fight to Jones for the title, makes sense. He's extremely high level. He's a great fighter. He's a Olympic, wrestler. He's got a lot of. He's a good guy as well. And him versus Johnson's just going to be an awesome fight. So if you don't agree with it, just shut your mouth and be okay with it, because it's going to be an awesome fight. I still think that Rumble's going to come away as a champion. I thought Rumble was going to beat Jones. I think the same is going to happen here. I think he's going to knock out Daniel Cormier. I think there's just nobody. I don't think that anybody can handle the punching power of Anthony Rumble Johnson. He hits so hard. And while I do think that Cormier definitely has a chance, I just don't think that he's going to be able to stand with Johnson for very long. I think that's what's going to cost him. He's going to try and stand with him too much. He's not going to be able to take him down like he wants to. And he's going to cost him. He's going to wind up getting knocked out. But it's going to be an awesome fight. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I think the UFC in every way made the right move, stripping Jones of the title, not letting him fight, suspending him, and then replacing him with Daniel Cormier, who actually kind of also happens to be his arch nemesis. So, but that's really going to be it for us this week. This is about 30 minutes in, give or take. So, while there was a whole lot to talk about, I didn't want to drag on. If you want to see some else of what I've had to say about Jon Jones, go over to NoCoastBias.com. Um, watch Mayweather Pacquiao this weekend. In any way that you can, go to Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever. Uh, but yeah, this is going to wrap it up for us. So next week we'll probably be talking about fight night between Mark Hunt and Stipe Miocic, which should be pretty fun. And hopefully, if there's more news that comes out, more controversial things to talk about, hopefully it happens. So we'll have more things to talk about. But check out NoCoastBias.com. Check out all the things we have up there, some really good stuff. Also, check out the NCB Square Table, where myself and three of my colleagues talk about all things sports. NHL, NBA playoffs. I will see you guys.